Greetings, loyal viewers. If you're fascinated by the wonders of ancient Egypt, I urge you to follow this channel to catch this and all our upcoming stories. Support us by subscribing, liking, and leaving a comment down below. It really helps us continue bringing you these tales from the past. And don't forget, your support keeps our pharaonic stories alive for everyone. Thank you for being here, and let's dive right into our journey. Secrets of the Pharaohs. How Egypt's rulers spent their days. Have you ever heard of a guy who killed 100 lions just to show off, then walked into a temple to wash a statue's feet? Yeah, that was a pharaoh. A real one. See, aside from their eternal sleep in tombs, pharaohs were actually super busy. But what does a day look like when you're half god, half CEO, and half war general? Well, that's exactly what we're about to find out. Let's follow a pharaoh's daily life, from sunrise to bedtime. At dawn, the pharaoh wakes up in his palace, maybe in Malkata, maybe in Memphis. He's surrounded by gardens, reception halls, and rooms so lavish they'd blow your mind. Take Amenhotep's third wing in Malkata, for example. The floors were decorated with Nile scenes, and the ceilings painted with protective gods. Not exactly simple decor. Then the servants arrive. They bathe him, anoint him with oils, dress him in fine linen, sprinkle him with perfume, and even apply cosmetics. Believe it or not, one official actually held the fancy title of Chief of Scented Oils. Yeah, that was a real job. Now the pharaoh is fully dressed, decked out in jewellery, kohl eyeliner, royal collars, amulets, and of course the striped Nemes headdress with his name on it. His personal guards, the Medjay, who once were Nubian scouts but became palace security, stand watch at the doors. Meanwhile, kids from the royal family, or sometimes even the Queen herself, might pop in. Queens like Tai even had rooms nearby, though the harem was always kept in a separate wing for privacy. The pharaoh might share a quick breakfast with his great royal wife. We even have depictions of Tutankhamun being tended to by Ankhesenamun, so yeah, there were family vibes in the morning too. Once he's ready, the pharaoh heads out surrounded by officials prepared for the day. The next stop? The reception hall, the throne room. This place even had a kind of window of appearances, where Akhenaten and Nefertiti once greeted the crowds, like an ancient royal balcony wave. But only top officials and foreign envoys got the VIP treatment inside. Here, the pharaoh sits high on his platform, surrounded by symbols of power. Amenhotep III, for example, had floors decorated with bound prisoners, a pretty literal statement piece. Visitors bowed flat to the ground. In fact, letters often say things like, "I fall at your feet 7 times and 7 times again." A little dramatic? Definitely. Nearby, the vizier and scribe stand ready to record every word. By the New Kingdom, Egypt actually had 2 viziers, one for Upper Egypt and one for Lower Egypt. Daily reports covered everything: taxes, lawsuits, and state projects. In the tomb of the vizier Rekhmir, scribes are shown keeping tabs on workers and foremen reporting about canals, temples, or quarries. Busy day, right? After that come the treasurers, architects, and army commanders. The pharaoh issues orders, asks questions, approves plans, and delivers justice. He might grant tombs, issue decrees, or even pardon crimes, all of which were later carved in stone. And even though the vizier handled most cases, ultimate authority always rested with the pharaoh. Justice came from him. Foreign affairs often took up the morning court. Envoys from subject lands or distant kingdoms would show up with tribute, horses, vases, gold, lapis lazuli, even giraffes and baboons. Yep, giraffes. Tomb paintings like those in Rekhmir's burial show the whole scene. These guests bowed, praised the pharaoh, and handed over gifts, though the pharaoh often sent them back with Egyptian gold. We know this because the Amarna letters reveal foreign rulers begging for Egyptian gold. The Royal Correspondence Office handled all these letters. Around 382 clay tablets from Akhenaten's reign have survived. Some requested marriage alliances, others begged for troops to crush rebellions. As always, the pharaoh dictated the replies, whether it was gifts, warnings, or reinforcements. By late morning, after petitions were heard and orders sealed, the pharaoh left the throne room. Now it was time for religion. He'd head to the temple to perform rituals and win the gods' favour. Priests handled daily rites, but officially the pharaoh was still high priest of every temple. Inscriptions often show him presenting offerings personally. Surrounded by priests and guards, he entered a grand temple, maybe Karnak, Ptah's temple in Memphis, or even a private palace temple like the one Amenhotep III built inside Malkata. Within the incense-filled sanctuary, the main ritual unfolded. The priest, or sometimes the pharaoh himself, washed and dressed the sacred statue, then offered food and drink. The pharaoh might pour water, burn incense and lay out bread, beer and meat, and if the ritual required it, a pure bull would be sacrificed. In one case, a pharaoh even consulted the oracle of Amun and offered a bull based on divine instruction. We see Seti I and Rameses III offering incense. Now, the temple sanctuary was usually closed off. Only a select few priests and the pharaoh himself were allowed inside. The offerings were meant to feed the gods symbolically, and whatever was left over went to the temple staff. But not every pharaoh was super religious. Some of them only showed up during the big festivals or on special dates in the calendar. Some of those festivals were rare but really important. For example, the Sed festival was held after 30 years on the throne. It was like a ritual reboot for the pharaoh, complete with sacrifices, ceremonial runs, and a symbolic reconfirmation of his rule over Upper and Lower Egypt. Pepi I carved his Sed festival into stone, and Amenhotep III celebrated it 3 times. You can still see his inscriptions decorating palaces and temples today. By midday, the pharaoh's sacred duties were done. The gods had been honored, cosmic order was maintained, and it was time to head back to the palace for food, rest, and whatever else came next. And yeah, he ate well. Excavations at Malkata show massive kitchens with bread ovens, storage rooms, and full-scale food production going on behind the scenes. On the pharaoh's plate, you'd usually find white bread, roasted meats like beef or goose, and whatever seasonal fruits and veggies were around: figs, lentils, cucumbers, the usual suspects. Beer was standard, but the pharaoh had a wider selection. He also drank imported wine, some of it aged in massive jars. Amenhotep III's wine list could put a French vineyard to shame. Meals were private, but not lonely. The pharaoh was often joined by family or a few close officials, with servants standing nearby. Sometimes musicians played in the background. After eating came downtime, or as they called it, the rest of the living god. Hunting was a favourite pastime. Amenhotep III once bragged that he killed 102 lions and 96 wild bulls in the first years of his reign. He was probably exaggerating, but the whole point was about order over chaos and symbolic domination of the wild. The pharaoh might also hop into a chariot, head into the desert to hunt gazelle near Memphis, or chase waterfowl around the delta. Real targets, real arrows. Tombs at places like Tombos, Thebes and Amarna show exactly that. Pharaohs in chariots, bow-drawn, animals fleeing. And if he wasn't out hunting, he might be practicing archery, wrestling or chariot drills. Pharaohs of the New Kingdom had to project the image of strong military leaders, fit, athletic and ready for war, even if they left most of the fighting to their generals. Amenhotep II took this to extremes. Inscriptions claim he fired arrows through copper targets from a moving chariot and beat 200 men with a single oar. Did that really happen? Who knows, but the stories stuck because they built the image of the pharaoh as a superhuman athlete, an unbeatable warrior chosen by the gods. So part of the afternoon was spent sweating, training with weapons, racing horses, competing with guards, before returning to official duties. The pharaoh might, tour building projects like temples, tombs or statues, all of them carved with his name, all built to last forever, or at least, close to it. On site, he'd step down from his chariot, surrounded by guards. Workers bowed, supervisors reported progress. We know Thutmose III personally oversaw obelisks at Karnak, and Amenhotep III inspected his massive artificial lake and colossal statues. It was theatre, the pharaoh showing up to declare, "This is mine, this will outlive me." The afternoon might also include a cruise on the Nile, a chance to wave at the people and give them a glimpse of their living god. But back at the palace, life slowed down again. Shaded gardens, pools, trees. Maybe he strolled with a child or a little dog. Amana art even shows Akhenaten doing exactly that, relaxing with his daughters, handing out grapes, a surprisingly human scene. By late afternoon, the pharaoh might spend time with his queen or just unwind to the sound of a harp. Even gods, after all, needed rest. As the sun sank on the horizon, the pharaoh performed one last ritual. He burned incense, sang hymns to Ra or Aten, whichever sun god was in favour that day. It was a symbolic good night to the sun, a divine guarantee it would rise again tomorrow and keep the cosmic machine running. Evenings were, a bit calmer. Sometimes they meant banquets, overflowing wine, music in the air, dancers performing, and nobles or foreign envoys in attendance, though, honestly, many nights were simpler. The pharaoh dined with his queen, maybe with his kids if they were around. Musicians played softly while the royal family ate dinner, just like any family except with much fancier tableware. After dinner came more downtime and games. Board games like Senet were a favourite. Tutankhamun even had sets buried with him, proof of how much they loved them, or maybe how much they dreaded boredom in the afterlife. Later, the palace grew quiet. The pharaoh might stroll through colonnades, guards shadowing him, not too close but always nearby. Trusted staff lingered, scribes, servants, the usual retinue. He might talk with his wife, look over something that couldn't wait until morning, or dictate a quick note, a passing thought, or even just a reminder to scold someone tomorrow. But eventually he withdrew to his bedroom. And this wasn't just any bedroom, it was a gallery of divine protection. The walls were covered in gods, watchful eyes everywhere. Overhead the ceiling was painted with protective deities keeping night watch. Maybe he slept alone, maybe not. Either way, with the doors closed and guards at their posts, the pharaoh finally rested. So yes, it's easy to imagine him as an untouchable god-king. But at the end of the day, he was still a man who needed dinner, entertainment and sleep. Sure, he carried enormous responsibility, but he also lived within a carefully crafted routine that kept the whole system together. And when he finally closed his eyes, surrounded by divine symbols and royal decor, there was probably a fleeting moment of peace, before the sunrise pulled him back into the cycle all over again. Finally, thank you all for listening. If you enjoyed this, please consider